Eleanor Vance's earliest memories were steeped in the subtle, almost imperceptible musk of ambition and old money clinging to the grand, colonial revival home in Short Hills, New Jersey. Her father, Robert Vance, was a force of nature, a self-made real estate titan whose formidable success was carved from an unyielding Capricorn will. He commanded respect, not through charisma, but through sheer, relentless execution, a steely gaze that could dissect a balance sheet or a person with equal intensity. His world was black and white, defined by profit margins, power plays, and the tangible assets of brick and mortar. Eleanor's mother, Sarah, a woman of delicate grace and quiet strength, often tried to soften the edges of Robert's rigid expectations, her gentle interventions a constant, if often futile, counterpoint to his unshakable convictions. From a young age, Eleanor was an anomaly in her father's eyes. While her younger brother, James, inherited Robert's competitive streak and an almost instinctive aptitude for contact sports, Eleanor found solace in the quiet intricacies of books and complex, multi-layered puzzles. Her father, a man who valued action above all else, saw these pursuits as distractions, not strengths. "You think too much, Eleanor," he'd often say, his voice lacking overt malice but heavy with the weight of his judgment. Leaders act. They don't ponder the nuances, they decide. He'd push her towards debate club, then dismiss her carefully constructed arguments as too emotional, not grounded enough in hard facts. He wanted a warrior. He had an analyst, a meticulous observer. The chasm between them felt both vast and unbridgeable. She enrolled at Rutgers University, choosing economics not out of a burning passion, but as a calculated, strategic maneuver, hoping the rigorous discipline and quantifiable achievements would finally earn her a genuine nod of approval. She immersed herself in statistical analysis, intricate financial modeling, and abstract market theories, excelling academically. Yet, even during her graduation ceremony in 2008, a year that would forever be etched in history by the tremors of the financial crisis, her father's praise felt backhanded, a verbal pat on the head rather than an acknowledgement of true potential. "Good grades, Eleanor. You're good at following instructions. That's valuable in its place, of course." The implicit qualification always lingered, like a faint, bitter aftertaste. After receiving her diploma, Eleanor wasted no time escaping the gilded cage of Short Hills. She moved to Manhattan, drawn by the city's relentless pulse, its dizzying array of opportunities, and the exhilarating promise of anonymity. She secured an entry-level analyst position at Sterling and Pierce, a prestigious but brutally demanding strategic consulting firm nestled in the gleaming, anonymous towers of Midtown East. Her first apartment, a cramped studio in Murray Hill, was barely bigger than her walk-in closet back home, but it was definitively hers. The distant, iconic silhouette of the Chrysler Building, a beacon of Art Deco ambition piercing the perpetual twilight haze, became her silent confidant during countless sleepless nights spent poring over spreadsheets and client reports. Her life became a relentless grind. Days bled into nights, often fueled by lukewarm coffee, hastily ordered takeout Chinese, and the gnawing, insistent desire to prove herself, not just to her father, but to the industry itself. She worked on complex corporate restructuring projects, high-stakes M&A deals, and aggressive market entry strategies for Fortune 500 companies. She observed, she learned, she absorbed every nuance of corporate power dynamics. She saw how true influence operated in the boardrooms, a delicate, intricate dance of strategy, influence, and yes, sometimes brute force cloaked in civility. Her father's world, she realized, was a cruder, less refined reflection of this high-stakes game, lacking the finesse and the strategic long game she was learning to master. She was often the only woman in male-dominated meetings, and the subtle dismissals, the casual mansplaining, the ingrained assumptions of her role as a mere note-taker rather than a potential strategist, sharpened her resolve to an almost painful degree. She wasn't just proving herself to Robert, she was proving it to an entire world that doubted women in leadership. Then came late 2012, her 30th birthday. A milestone, a moment she had quietly hoped would finally mark her undeniable arrival in her father's esteem. She had just been promoted to senior consultant, a highly competitive leap at Sterling and Pierce, signaling her clear trajectory towards partnership and significant influence. The celebratory family dinner was held at the Chop House in Short Hills, a dimly lit, wood-paneled establishment that exuded old-world opulence, and served as a frequent, almost ritualistic backdrop for her father's most important business dealings. The air was thick with the rich scent of prime rib, expensive scotch, and a palpable tension that often accompanied gatherings involving Robert Vance. Robert, now 60, his silver hair impeccably combed, his custom-tailored suit exuding an aura of unchallengeable authority, raised his crystal glass. Eleanor, sitting opposite him, felt a flicker of hope, a fragile anticipation. This was it, the moment she had worked a decade for. The validation. "Eleanor," he began, his voice resonating across the polished mahogany table, drawing the attention of their small family party, her mother, Sarah, looking elegant but slightly anxious, her hand resting protectively on her own glass. James, her younger brother, now a nascent junior executive in a rival real estate firm, fidgeting uncomfortably with his napkin, avoiding eye contact. "Congratulations on your promotion. It's a good step. A solid achievement for a support role." The words landed like a lead weight in her stomach, heavy and cold. Support role, not leader, not visionary, just a cog, albeit a well-oiled, efficient one, in someone else's machine. Her father continued, entirely oblivious to the subtle shift in her posture, the almost imperceptible tightening grip on her wine glass, the sudden prickling heat behind her eyes. "But real leadership, true vision, that's something you either have or you don't. It's an innate quality, a gut instinct for command. You'll never lead, sweetheart. You're too soft for it, too much heart. You're better suited to execute someone else's plan, not to forge your own path, not to innovate on a grand, industry-shaping scale." The clinking of cutlery, the hushed murmur of other diners, the muted jazz playing softly in the background, all seemed to amplify his pronouncement, turning it into a public decree. The warmth of the room chilled, an invisible frost spreading through her veins. Her mother's hand briefly touched her arm under the table, a silent apology, a desperate attempt at comfort. James looked pointedly at his half-eaten steak, embarrassed, perhaps even a little relieved it wasn't him. Eleanor, however, met her father's gaze, unflinching. There was no malice in his steely blue eyes, just a paternal certainty, an unshakable belief in his own infallible judgment. And that, in a way, was far worse than outright cruelty. It wasn't an insult designed to wound. It was a perceived, undeniable fact, delivered with the casual, dismissive authority of a man stating the obvious to a child. She forced a smile, a brittle, fragile thing that felt alien on her lips, murmuring a barely audible thank you. Inside, something irrevocable, something foundational, snapped. The decade-long, Sisyphean pursuit of his approval disintegrated into bitter dust. Feigning a sudden, splitting headache, Eleanor excused herself, leaving the untouched birthday cake and the strained family behind. The express train from Short Hills to Penn Station was a blur of rhythmic clatter and distorted reflections in the darkened windows of the New Jersey Transit car. Each clickety-clack of the wheels seemed to echo her father's words, carving them deeper and deeper into the raw, exposed nerves of her consciousness. The emotional pain was excruciating, a raw wound ripped open, bleeding humiliation and self-doubt. Back in her cramped Murray Hill apartment, the city lights, usually a comforting, vibrant embrace, now felt indifferent, mocking, shining on a world where she was deemed fundamentally inadequate. She didn't just collapse onto her sofa. She crumpled, shedding the carefully constructed facade of the past decade, which shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces around her. Tears, hot and stinging, streamed down her face, tears of incandescent anger that twisted her features, tears of overwhelming frustration that clenched her jaw until it ached, and tears of a profound, generational pain. A lifetime of being underestimated, of being told she wasn't quite enough, culminated in that brutal public dismissal. She saw herself as a child again, meticulously building a complex Lego castle, only for her father to sweep a dismissive hand through it and say, "That's nice, but it's not a real blueprint, Eleanor. Real buildings require plans, not toys." She saw her countless hours poring over textbooks at Rutgers, her early mornings and late nights at Sterling and Pierce, all reduced to a support role, a footnote in someone else's grand narrative. For hours, she lay there, the words replaying like a broken record in the echoing silence of her apartment. Never lead. Too soft. Execute someone else's plan. The despair was a suffocating blanket, threatening to extinguish the last, flickering ember of her ambition. But then, as the first pale, bruised sliver of dawn painted the sky outside her window, a different sensation began to stir, slowly, inexorably. A cold, hard resolve, sharp as a freshly honed blade, began to crystallize in the core of her being. The tears dried, leaving stiff, salty streaks on her cheeks, but her eyes hardened, gleaming with a newfound, dangerous clarity. She wouldn't just prove him wrong. She would make him understand, explicitly and unequivocally, in the only language he truly spoke. The language of power, of market dominance, of irrefutable consequence. She would dismantle his certainty, brick by painful, undeniable brick. Her vengeance wouldn't be loud or impulsive. It would be a strategic masterpiece, meticulously planned, silently executed over years, a slow-burning fuse leading to an explosive, undeniable truth. Her softness, the very trait her father had condemned as a fatal flaw, was Eleanor's most potent, underestimated weapon. She had an uncanny ability to connect, to empathize, to listen, skills entirely absent from her father's transactional playbook. While Robert Vance steamrolled his way through negotiations, forging deals through intimidation and raw force, Eleanor built genuine alliances, cultivating loyalty and trust. She cultivated relationships, not just with powerful executives and board members, but with junior associates, administrative staff, and even industry journalists. The very people her father, in his Olympian detachment, would never even notice. She understood, intuitively, that information flowed through every artery of a corporation, not just the privileged corridors of the C-suite, and that true influence was often built from the ground up, not just imposed from the top down. Crucially, Eleanor possessed an innate, forward-thinking understanding of the emerging digital landscape. A realm her father, a man rooted firmly in the tangible world of concrete and steel, had consistently dismissed as fleeting fads or niche curiosities. Her firm, Sterling and Pierce, found itself increasingly advising on high-profile tech real estate ventures in Silicon Alley, New York City's burgeoning tech hub. She plunged into this new world with a fervent intensity, devouring every article, attending every obscure seminar on data center architecture, co-working space economics, and smart building integration. While her father saw office buildings as static assets, immovable and unchanging, Eleanor saw them as dynamic platforms, capable of evolving with unprecedented speed alongside technological shifts and the changing demands of a global workforce. She foresaw the tectonic plates of commercial real estate shifting dramatically, driven inexorably by the rise of e-commerce, the normalization of remote work, and an ever-increasing demand for flexible, amenity-rich, and technologically advanced spaces. On her own time, often sacrificing weekends and evenings, she began attending industry conferences, not just the big-name expos her firm sponsored, but niche gatherings focused on proptech, sustainable urban development, and the future of work. She met founders of agile startups, innovative venture capitalists investing in next-gen urban infrastructure, and visionary architects designing adaptive reuse projects that reimagined old spaces. Her network expanded exponentially, reaching far beyond the traditional, insular circles her father moved in. These connections weren't transactional. They were built on mutual respect, shared intellectual curiosity, and a collective vision for the future of urban environments. Each new contact, each new piece of knowledge, was a meticulously placed brick in her foundation of power. She began to see the glaring, systemic vulnerabilities in her father's Vance Holdings empire with terrifying clarity. His portfolio was heavily weighted towards traditional, often aging, retail and office properties in suburban areas. Precisely the sectors most susceptible to the seismic shifts she was observing. His debt structures, once robust and stable, now looked precarious and over-leveraged in a rapidly changing market. His key partnerships were with old money institutions, slow to adapt, resistant to innovation, clinging to an antiquated business model. It was, she realized, a dinosaur, immensely powerful and dominant in its prime, but now lumbering inexorably towards an ice age it couldn't comprehend, led by a man too proud to see the approaching storm. Eleanor's plan began to crystallize, not as a malicious, spiteful attack, but as a cool, calculated, strategic dismantling. She meticulously mapped out every single asset in Vance Holdings, every lease agreement, every loan covenant. She analyzed property values, projected cash flows, and identified the specific properties most likely to become distressed assets, ripe for acquisition. It was an obsessive, clandestine project, conducted late at night from her small apartment. A second laptop dedicated solely to her father's vulnerabilities, shielded by intricate encryption and strong firewalls from Sterling and Pierce's corporate network. The weight of this secret, this monumental undertaking, was immense, but it also gave her a profound sense of purpose. To truly arm herself with an unassailable expertise, she enrolled in a rigorous evening master's program in real estate finance at NYU's prestigious Schack Institute. For 2 grueling years, she balanced her demanding consulting job with late-night classes, immersing herself in advanced valuation techniques, the intricacies of real estate investment trusts, REITs, and complex securitization models. The program was physically and mentally exhausting, often requiring her to sacrifice weekends and any semblance of a social life. But each complex equation solved, each challenging case study mastered, was another crucial brick laid in her foundation of unassailable expertise. Her discerning mentor at Sterling and Pierce, a seasoned partner named Marcus Thorne, subtly observed her intense dedication. He saw not a soft woman, but a formidable mind, a quiet storm brewing, and began entrusting her with increasingly complex, independent projects that unknowingly honed the very skills she would use against her own family. He saw her potential, a stark contrast to her father's blindness. The year is 2018. Eleanor, now 36, held the coveted title of director at Sterling and Pierce, a position that carried significant weight and a burgeoning reputation for closing the kind of complex, high-stakes deals that redefined market segments. Her name was whispered in certain industry circles as a fixer, an innovative strategist particularly adept in the burgeoning real estate tech sector. Her father, Robert Vance, meanwhile, was in deep, undeniable trouble. The headwinds she had foreseen years ago had become a full-blown gale force, tearing at the foundations of his empire. His traditional retail properties were hemorrhaging tenants. Foot traffic had dwindled to ghost town levels, and a substantial portion of his aging office space remained stubbornly vacant as companies across the nation embraced flexible work models and downsized their physical footprints. His debt-to-equity ratio, once a point of immense pride, was now a flaming red flag waving furiously in the face of his increasingly anxious lenders. For many months, Eleanor had been quietly cultivating a strategic relationship with Liam O'Connell, the charismatic and forward-thinking CEO of Innovate Spaces, a rapidly expanding co-working and tech-focused real estate investment trust that was aggressively disrupting the market. Innovate Spaces was urgently seeking prime urban and suburban locations to convert into dynamic, high-tech, flexible office hubs. Precisely the type of properties Robert Vance's portfolio contained, but lacked the vision, the capital, and the modern expertise to redevelop effectively. Eleanor, leveraging her position through Sterling and Pierce, had skillfully positioned herself as Innovate Spaces' lead strategic advisor for their ambitious acquisition strategy. essentially becoming the architect of their market expansion. The stage was meticulously set for the climax. It unfolded in a sleek, glass-walled conference room suspended high above Midtown Manhattan within the glittering, ultra-modern headquarters of Innovate Spaces. The target: a substantial, strategically critical portion of Robert Vance's most struggling commercial portfolio, the very properties that were dragging his entire empire down. Eleanor had meticulously structured a comprehensive deal, a veritable lifeline for Vance Holdings, but one with a devastating, undeniable catch. Innovate Spaces would acquire these distressed properties at a significantly undervalued price, absorbing the crippling debt attached to them, and then proceed to redevelop them into cutting-edge facilities, branded as Innovate Hubs. It was an offer Robert Vance couldn't, in good conscience, refuse, because refusal meant the swift, brutal dismantling of his entire company by his increasingly impatient creditors. Acceptance, however, meant ceding control, admitting a profound, public failure, and watching a significant chunk of his life's legacy sold off under duress by his own daughter. Eleanor walked into the conference room precisely at 9 a.m., her posture ramrod straight. A custom-tailored Navy power suit a second skin that conveyed an aura of unshakable competence. Her heart pounded a fierce, almost frantic rhythm against her ribs, but her expression remained one of cool, detached professionalism, every emotion meticulously compartmentalized. Liam O'Connell, a man who rarely minced words or showed unnecessary sentimentality, gave her a reassuring, almost admiring nod as she took her designated place at the head of the polished obsidian table. She was, without a doubt, chairing the meeting. The room was filled with Innovate Spaces' executive leadership, their formidable legal team from Skadden Arps, and their sharp financial advisors from Goldman Sachs. The air crackled with a low hum of anticipation and corporate power. Copies of the comprehensive acquisition proposal, a thick binder resembling a phone book, meticulously crafted over many months by Eleanor and her dedicated team, were distributed. Her father, Robert Vance, was conspicuously, painfully absent. He wasn't invited. Instead, his legal counsel, a stoic but visibly uncomfortable senior partner from his long-standing firm, sat beside a mid-level executive from Vance Holdings, a man named Gary Reynolds, whose pale face and clasped hands under the table spoke volumes of his profound discomfort. They were there as mere proxies, to listen, to respond, and ultimately to accept the terms being dictated by Eleanor Vance. Eleanor began her presentation. Her voice, calm, authoritative, and perfectly modulated, cut through the initial tension like a finely honed surgical instrument. She presented the financial models, the exhaustive market analysis, the projected return on investment for Innovate Spaces, all built, with a chilling precision, on the crumbling foundations of her father's failing empire. She used real-time data to meticulously demonstrate the diminishing returns of his traditional assets, the spiraling vacancy rates, the increasing pressure from his aggressive lenders. Each slide projected onto the massive screen was a precise, surgical strike, outlining the irrefutable decline of Vance Holdings' most vulnerable assets. She answered every single question posed by Innovate Spaces' shrewd executives with an almost clinical precision, her command of every detail absolute, her arguments unassailable. There was no tremor of emotion in her voice, only facts, figures, and strategic imperatives. The meeting progressed with an almost suffocating efficiency, each point leading inexorably to the next, sealing Robert Vance's fate. Every tentative counterargument or feeble protest from Vance Holdings representatives was met with a clear, irrefutable data point or a contract clause that left no room for negotiation. When the final terms were presented, the rock-bottom valuation, the assumption of crippling debt in exchange for a significant, controlling equity stake, the complete transfer of operational control for those specific assets, Robert Vance's representatives looked utterly defeated, their shoulders slumped. Gary Reynolds' face was ashen, his hands clasped so tightly under the table his knuckles were white. They knew this was not just their best option, but their only option to avert a far more catastrophic public collapse. The acquisition, in principle, was approved. The silence that followed Eleanor's final, quiet pronouncement was deafening, broken only by the rustle of papers as the lawyers began to draft the final agreements, sealing the fate of a legacy. The deal was announced a few weeks later. A bold, front-page headline in the Wall Street Journal, sending ripples of speculation, surprise, and not a little schadenfreude through the entire real estate industry. Innovate Spaces issued a glowing press release, laudatory in its praise of Eleanor Vance for her visionary strategy, unparalleled understanding of evolving market dynamics, and her instrumental leadership role in securing this landmark, transformative acquisition. The industry buzzed with whispers of her brilliance, her shrewdness, her quiet ascent. Robert Vance, in a terse, carefully worded statement distributed by his PR team, spoke vaguely of strategic restructuring and adapting to market changes. A desperate, transparent attempt to frame the forced sale as a proactive business decision rather than a retreat. He never once publicly acknowledged Eleanor's involvement, let alone her orchestrating role. His silence, however, spoke volumes. Months later, a small, cream-colored envelope arrived via messenger at Eleanor's Sterling and Pierce office, delivered directly to her desk. Inside, a single sheet of heavy, embossed stationery bore her father's elegant, if slightly shaky, script. "Eleanor," it read, the words stark and precise, "you played a smart game. Smarter than I gave you credit for, undoubtedly. You might just have a leader in you after all, but this isn't how true leadership is built. There are other, more honorable ways to make your mark, to leave a lasting legacy." No apology, no direct praise. Just a grudging, almost pained acknowledgement wrapped in a thinly veiled criticism. It wasn't the tearful capitulation she might have fantasized about during those dark, desperate nights in her apartment, but it was an acknowledgement nonetheless, a concession extracted at great personal cost. The vengeance, meticulously planned and perfectly executed over 6 grueling, solitary years, left Eleanor with a complex, unsettling mix of emotions. There was a cold, quiet satisfaction, the undeniable triumph of proving him wrong, of shattering his dismissive prophecy. She was a leader, undeniably. She had forged her own path, not merely executed someone else's plan. But this victory, while undeniable, also left a profound, hollow echo. The cost was a deeper, seemingly irreparable fissure in an already fractured relationship. Her mother, Sarah, called her a few weeks after the deal was finalized, her voice strained, laced with an unspoken sorrow. "He's changed, Eleanor. This broke something in him that I don't think can be mended." James, her brother, maintained a polite, almost glacial distance, a quiet disapproval in his eyes whenever they met at family gatherings, which became increasingly rare and awkward, devoid of genuine warmth. Eleanor continued to climb the corporate ladder, her ambition now self-sustaining, no longer primarily fueled by the desperate need for external validation. But the shadow of that past humiliation, and the cold, almost clinical satisfaction of her strategic victory, remained a complex, interwoven part of her professional identity. She learned that while proving a point could be a powerful, even necessary, catalyst for personal growth, true, impactful leadership was about building, fostering growth, and elevating others, not just dismantling the old guard. The act of tearing down, she realized, carried its own heavy burden. She found herself at a profound crossroads. She could continue down the path of cutthroat ambition, seeking ever greater conquests and personal accolades, or she could redefine her purpose, choosing a different kind of legacy. She chose the latter, with a newfound clarity. Eleanor began dedicating significant time to mentoring young women entering the intensely competitive finance and real estate sectors. She founded an internal program at Sterling and Pierce, aptly named Ascend, specifically designed to support and champion female talent within the firm, creating a safe space for growth and challenging corporate norms. She shared her own story, not as a tale of unbridled triumph, but as a cautionary one about the hidden costs of external validation and the deceptive allure of revenge. She ensured, with unwavering dedication, that the next generation of female leaders would never feel the dismissive sting of being told they couldn't lead, or that their softness was, in fact, an insurmountable weakness. Her true legacy, she decided, would be built on lifting others, on creating pathways and opportunities, not just on conquering her past. The cold satisfaction of her personal triumph slowly faded, replaced by the deep, enduring warmth of genuine, collective impact, a far more fulfilling and sustainable form of leadership than any revenge could ever offer. She still saw her father occasionally, at holiday gatherings, their interactions polite, distant, forever marked by the unspoken history between them. The battle was won, but the profound war for her own definition of success had truly just begun, now fought on her own terms, for a purpose far greater than personal vindication.